Hello there, and welcome everybody to the latest Showrunner Huddle. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Johnny Naster, and we are both very excited to be back doing these Showrunner Huddles again. We're going to get back on our regular schedule, doing them every other Thursday, probably at this time too, 4:30 Eastern time on Thursdays, every other Thursday. But we'll see if it's a good time that you like, and if it is, we'll keep doing it. But we're excited to be here and answer your questions. Mr. Naster, welcome. We were just talking about how it's been a while since we've actually seen each other on camera, because we've just done a lot of calls lately. So it's nice to see your face and your shirts again.
It is. It is good to see you. Yeah, it's true. We've just been calls and I guess podcasts and such, but
not enough podcasts.
But none of this face to face. So it is good to be back.
It is good to be back. It is good to be back.
I like this every other week. I like the way you say that. It rolls off the tongue nicely.
It does.
4:30 Eastern every other week.
Yeah, I like kind of having a set time too that people can kind of plan around. That makes it good. And by the way, if you're wondering, we're not using our mics like our real professional mics, and so our audio may not sound as good as it normally does or as you're used to. And this is kind of something that we started doing back when we were doing Showrunner Huddles many months ago on Blab, because we did used to use the microphone and have the real, supreme audio quality, but we also didn't necessarily like having the microphones in front of our faces for these events. So we kind of decided it was an okay trade-off to, degrade the audio a little bit for just being a little bit more connected with you since we're on video. So that's why we're not using our microphones, just using the headphone microphones. So yeah, that's kind of the thinking there. So Johnny, what's new before we jump in and answer some questions here? What's on your mind? What's happening?
Not too much right now. I'm in a new office yet again.
I was gonna say your background looked different.
Yeah, totally. A new place, so got a beautiful view I'm looking out at. Yeah, man, just, I don't know, I'm excited to get back to these, get back to the community with the showrunners. And I think, done some thinking after hitting my 3-year anniversary of podcasting. And I don't know, I'm just ready to kind of dive deeper into it as this evolved sort of version of podcasting now. It has changed a lot, I think. It feels like it's changed a lot in the market, and in a good way. But it does, I think, involve a change in sort of the way that we approach it. So I look forward to doing these, figuring out where people are stuck. I know sort of sticking points I've hit with Hack the Entrepreneur. So it's also going to be good to go back, I think, and create some new content, maybe some new course material, and see, just to help people overcome that, and sort of work through processes and things that I've had to work out myself too.
I agree completely. I know we obviously haven't been able to be as active with either the Showrunner podcast or the course, over the last few months as we've wanted to be. And I think we're going to have that opportunity to do that now more going forward. So I know you and I have a call on Monday where we're going to be planning a whole lot of stuff out. We've blocked 90 minutes on the calendar for it, which is a crazy amount for a call. But we have a lot of things that we want to do. And I think even though, maybe there haven't been new course lessons and we haven't been able to do these huddles as much lately, and shoot, we haven't even had podcast episodes lately. And I know kind of from the outside looking in, that can make it seem, appear like, oh man, what's going on with the Showrunner? We're definitely as committed to it as ever. And there's been a lot of learning going on and a lot of experiences happening that I know we've already talked about, how excited we are to be able to share those. So I think there's a lot that's going to be happening in the future. And obviously the first step is getting back with these huddles. And so we'll keep moving forward from there. And I echo what you said, John. I'm excited to keep bringing our experiences, and especially some of the new lessons that we're learning with where kind of the new things that are happening with podcasting. And there's a lot. And a lot's been going on with our other shows too, that we've been able to draw some experiences from. I was just thinking, doing this huddle on Google Hangouts, this is the easiest Google Hangout that I have had in the longest time, because normally when we do a show every Thursday night for the assembly call, and we broadcast it live as a Hangout. But this is also the show that is broadcast on the radio in Indiana. And so I record separately through Spreaker, through a Skype call so that I can do the bumper, like the intro and outro music for the individual segments of the show. Because otherwise I'd have to take the audio from the YouTube video and then chop it all up. So it's easier. So I typically have Skype going, Spreaker, this, and I'm monitoring the time so I can get us in and out of segments at specific times, because we have 26 minutes for the first 2 segments and 24 for the second 2 segments. So we have, like, I have to hit the music right on so I don't have to do post-production at the end. And I hit start on this and I was like, wow, that's all I have to do is just hit start. This is great. This is awesome. So let's have some fun here. We're doing this on Hangouts. If you're watching on YouTube Live, there's a chat there on YouTube Live. Use that to interact with each other, to ask us questions, all that good stuff. You know, definitely if you asked a question that we're going to answer here, you can provide follow-up questions there. You can provide additional context for your question. Or if a new question comes to your mind and you want us to address it, ask it there, and we'll be happy to get to it. You ready to answer some questions?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so let's do Mario's question first. So okay. Mario, who is awesome, longtime Showrunner listener and course member. It's great to hear from you again, Mario. Mario says, seems like a couple years ago, a lot of people were starting podcasts, but a lot of the podcasts were short-lived. What is the percentage of podcasts which make it past 8 to 10 shows and continue on a long-term basis? Curious if there are any stats like that. I saw a lot of podcasts start in the realtor space, and that's the space that Mario is in, is the realtor space, but most of them did not stick with it. Great to see both of you back in action in Huddle, and we are excited to be back, as we just said. Thanks, Mario. So let me take the first crack at this one, Johnny, because I went out and I looked for data on this. You know, I wouldn't say that I did the deepest dive I've ever done, but, you know, definitely spent some time doing some Google searches and trying to see if anything came up, you know, that was relatively easy to find. And you won't be surprised to learn that it was hard to find data on this, as it seems to be very hard to find data on a lot of things in podcasting, although that is slowly but surely starting to change, which is certainly a good thing for the future. I did find one blog post, and this was from September of 2015, and it's by a guy named Josh Morgan, and this was on Medium, and it was called How Podcasts Have Changed in 10 Years by the Numbers. And let me post the link to this in the YouTube chat here real quick so that you all will have it. So there's the link to that. And basically, you know, he went through and you know, he goes through his whole methodology for how he did this research. But he found a number of interesting pieces of data about podcasts. Now, specific to the question that you're asking, Mario, he did, you know, kind of look at that. And his takeaway was this. Basically, he says between June of 2005 and June of 2015, so 10 years, a typical podcast ran for 6 months and 12 episodes at 2 episodes per month before going inactive. So that was the average. Obviously, there were several shows that went on much longer and had many more episodes than that, and several other shows that, you know, maybe just had 1 or 2 episodes and didn't go. But that data kind of jibes with what, you know, what Mario was saying, you know, where he was asking what is the percentage of podcasts that make it past 8 to 10 shows and continue on a long-term basis. So I don't know the number for that, but Johnny, as you and I have talked many times, that, you know, kind of the 7 to 10, 8 to 10 episode mark does seem to be kind of an important mark to get past. And where if you can get past that, it seems like your ability to have success and long-term success really goes up. You know, that seems to be a place where a lot of podcasters kind of fall off. And my hypothesis for why that happens is I think a lot of people, when they start a podcast, have a great deal of enthusiasm for the topic, for the show. You know, if you're excited enough to start a podcast, you've probably got ideas for like 5, 6, 7 episodes that you just have to get out. And it's what happens after that initial wave of creation. Because there's a good chance that after only 7 to 10 episodes, you probably haven't built the audience of your dreams yet, right? I mean, you haven't really been around long enough to build a real loyal audience to see huge, huge numbers, unless, you know, you're one of the rare people who can do that in 10 episodes. And so I think at that point, it might not be the audience growth or even the goal achievement that sustains you. There's got to really be a deeper love for the topic and for the process of podcasting and for the audience you're serving to get past that. And I think a lot of people get excited about podcasting and what it can do and this idea, but they may find they don't have that deeper love that will take them past that initial point. So I think that's what happens a lot of times. I think if you can make it past that, it's a pretty good sign that you've got something a little bit deeper there, a connection to the content or to your goals or to your audience, or hopefully all three, that helps power you forward. So I think, in summation there, Mara, I think what Josh found, kind of backs up, this 8 to 10 idea that you talked about. And I think look, you just got to have that deeper love, I think, to move on past it. What did you find, Johnny? Did you find any numbers on this, or do you have any hypotheses for why this kind of generally accepted amount of episodes and time seems to be a big tripping point for new showrunners?
So I've stopped looking for this number, because it seems to be that whenever we mention, over the years, whenever we've either written a post on Copyblogger or something and mention a number, people always in the comments or somewhere tell us that number's wrong. And it's like this. And so we might say it's like they don't make it to 8 episodes. People are like, no, they make it to 9. It's like, okay, well, I'm not here to argue whether they make it to 13 or 8, right? To me, though, I've started to think about it in like a different sort of context, maybe, or just a different way, as in like businesses. And this is how I typically think of things. But I mean, the general consensus is that 8 out of 10 small businesses fail within the first 18 months. That to me, although podcasts don't have to necessarily go for 18 months, and lots of businesses fail within that 18 months, but they fail really early on. They just extend that window to get that number. But I think there's a lot of correlation between why businesses will fail and why podcasts will stop. A podcast is not going to be getting traction and stop, I don't think. I think that's very rare, because I absolutely agree with you that you need that sort of passion behind it, but also you need somebody else. You need something, like you need to at least see some downloads coming in to inspire you. And if you see quite a few, like more than you were expecting, even if that's 50 an episode early on or 100 an episode, that's going to really motivate you, right? And it's like with the business that if you do it right and you start to get customers and they're paying you, you get inspired and you go and get excited and do more and do better work. You create better shows, you create more, you want to, those kind of things. So I really I kind of want, when you're thinking about this, and if this is like an apprehension point for you prior to launching, to me, the way to overcome this issue of stopping too early, what I say, is to really focus beforehand on your market, the market that you are entering, and finding that gap that we call it, so that you hit the market. It's like any business, any product, any service. You can't just be the same as everything else in the market and expect to catch on. It just doesn't work that way. There has to be a gap somehow in the marketplace where you can fit and intrigue listeners, inspire them, entertain them, whatever it is, but make them want to listen to you. And if you do that right, which we spend at least one module, maybe 2 full modules in the course, really about like that whole audience and then getting that format properly. It's just so important. And I know sometimes we get excited and then we want to skip sort of past that and get to recording and get to launching our show and doing all those things that are really exciting. But if you skip out on the foundations, you've now built a house on a foundation that is no good, and that house just won't, it'll be crooked and not work, and it won't sort of sustain you, and it won't build the audience. And when you don't get any of that feedback because you don't have any listeners after 10 episodes or 15 or 20 episodes, typically most of us don't have enough love to just keep doing it out into the ether with nobody listening. That's not because you've hit the wrong topic. That's not because you're not a good showrunner. It's because you just didn't do the work and in your marketplace and then really focus in on that one listener and really, really what that journey is you want to take them on. It's so important. To me, that's why businesses fail, and that's why products fail, and that's why podcasts as a product fail. And to me, that's sort of, I think, the better way as a showrunner to start thinking about it rather than this general consensus. Like, I would never advise somebody to not start a business just because the fact the general rule is that 8 out of 10 of them are like 80% of the chances you're going to fail. But I wouldn't be like, well, don't start a business. I would just be smart about it. Really pay attention, focus into your market, find your ideal client, or as we call it, the audience of one, and what you're going to do for them. And then how you're differentiating from everything else in your market right now as a podcast, or even as just a content marketing perspective in general. There's probably blogs, there's probably YouTube channels or something within your marketplace. What is it they're doing? What can you take different aspects of people who are doing it well and create something new that can enter your marketplace and stand out? To me, that's really how I guess I'm just tired of putting out a number of what that episode number is, having people come back, because none of us really know. It's not really there. But I mean, we don't talk about like how many books fail, or how many authors write only and get published 1 book or 2 books or 3 books before quitting. You know what I mean? Like, but there's something like, it's like, how many books? Like 600. Yeah. I was reading to do on this because I was like, well, maybe it just won't talk about business, but Forbes, the number I saw, their best estimate, because books are published by so many different houses, that it was like between 600,000 and 1 million books are published every single year. How many are on the bestseller list, right? There's 10 on New York Times bestseller list at any given time, from 600,000 to 1 million.
That one is.
But I mean, but we don't discuss like how many authors before, like, even, I'm trying to think of like some newer authors that have written 2 or 3 or 4 books, and then all of a sudden they get really, really popular. Like even Chris Gillibo, like his first book, I can't remember his first book, but then it was like the $100 Startup, and now his new one is this Side Hustle.
The Art of Nonconformity.
There you go. And it was nowhere near as popular as the first one, or as the one that just is launched now. I'm actually going to see him in about doing his book launch of his new one.
Oh, nice.
Up the street from me. And it's way bigger than that one, but lots of like authors would have quit because that one didn't catch on. But he still just like realized, he's like, actually what happened was I didn't find or hit the market quite right or satisfy my reader quite right. And so he learned from that and he went into the next one and there. So with a podcast, it's like, it's the same sort of thing. And I mean, we all have podcasts probably in our history that we like did it, and then it was like, no, this one's not quite right. Go to another one, go to another one. And same with businesses. Like so many people like, oh, you're successful at business, but then it's like, yeah, but I have like 5 businesses that failed before this one worked. So I think we should just think about podcasting sort of in the same way, and not so much focus on that number, but focus on making a better product at the beginning, and using that to help us push past whatever that number happens to be.
I agree. I like your new context of thinking about this. I don't think the number is important. I think for every showrunner, there is going to be a point in time after you launch. When you launch, your head's down and you're going and you've got this content. Hopefully you've got several episodes in the can before you even launch. But at a certain point, when that sprint ends, there's going to be this point where you kind of look up, and it's like, all right, when you look up, do you have something that gets you to kind of put your head back down and get going again to do the next 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever it is? It's not the number, it's that point. And I think, you made a good point there. You've got to have something that keeps you going, some kind of audience growth or some kind of goal achievement. There does have to be something. And I think it's important at that point to be realistic about what that can and will be, because I see a lot of people who start a podcast and expect to be selling advertising on it right away. Well, that's just not realistic for a lot of people. Some people can do it. Johnny, you did it with Hack the Entrepreneur, but that's may not happen for a lot of people, and you may not have enough downloads right off the bat for it to be, worth anything. So you got to be realistic about monetization. You got to be realistic about audience growth, but definitely there needs to be something there, whenever you look up that keeps you going. And so I think Johnny, what you talked about with doing the work ahead of time and really making sure that you're talking to the right audience and you're delivering them good quality content and that you give yourself the best opportunity to have something meaningful at that point when you look up, that will really help you get past that point. So I think it's good to think about it before you start and prepare yourself and be like, look, at a certain point, after I get going here, I'm going to be looking up and I'm going to need something to keep me going. Let me make sure that I put myself in the best position to do that. And if you do, then you'll kind of hit that with some momentum and move on to the next phase. And, the more of those phases that you move through, obviously the better your chances of building an audience and building something that can really sustain. So excellent question, Mario. Love it. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This is from Andrew. Andrew is a new member of the course, I believe, and he has a really good show. I was just listening to it the other day. Inspired Money, I believe, is the name of the show. Let me look. It's about money. Yeah, Inspired Money. Really good show. Kind of like Jamar, who's got a show about money too. Jamar, remind me the name of your show. Put it in the, I think Jamar's here. Put it in the chat. We've got several good shows in the Showrunner course about money and about finances. So definitely check those out. But let's read Andrew's question here, because this is a good one. This is a meaty one. So Andrew said, at the Inbound conference in Boston, HubSpot said that paid ads had little impact for their growth show podcast. Their conclusion is that Facebook, Twitter, etc. are text-based platforms, so it is difficult to convert people to listen or subscribe to a podcast. They went on to say that the #1 way people learn of new podcasts is word of mouth. For new shows trying to get in front of more listeners, what are your thoughts for tips and tactics? So I will say this, at Rainmaker Digital, we have done some paid advertising for podcast episodes, and we've kind of had mixed results with it too. We haven't necessarily had great success, or at least success we've really been able to track leading to great numbers of subscriptions or increases in downloads. But we have seen through doing it actually growth in the email lists that are associated with those podcasts. So I think it's important not to kind of put all your eggs in one basket and just hope to get the subscription. But if you send people to, a nice page, maybe it's an episode page or the main show homepage or wherever you send people, if there is some sort of call to action there for people to get on an email list or start getting a newsletter, that can really help you see ROI from those paid ads, even if it's difficult ROI to track with a specific dollar amount gain for what you paid. At least if your email list is going up, that's helping. So I think that can be a little bit hard. And I do think that there's probably something to the fact that Facebook and Twitter are text-based platforms, and you've got to obviously be really smart with your targeting. And if you don't, you're going to be hitting a lot of people who just may not care about podcasts, may not be listening to podcasts. And so that's not going to really do you a whole lot of good. But I will transition, Johnny, over to you to answer this question by saying this. And that is that I think one of the best ways to answer Andrew's question is actually with advice that you have given in the past. And that is that the #1 way to get in front of more listeners, more podcast listeners, is to actually get in front of more podcast listeners. So while podcast recognition is growing, and we know that more and more people every year are listening to podcasts, recognize what podcasts are listening in the previous month, all of that. The numbers keep growing. They're the one place where there is always going to be 100% overlap between podcast listeners and people who potentially listen to your podcast is on other people's podcasts. So, you could, write a guest post on someone's blog, you can reach out on social media, or you can go be a guest on a podcast, or maybe guest host a podcast for another site in your niche. And right there, that every single person that you reach is a potential member of your podcast audience because they're already listening to a podcast. And this is advice, Johnny, that you gave that I thought was really smart, that if you're really committed to growing your audience and getting in front of other podcast listeners, go be a guest on a podcast. Or, I've seen great success guest hosting a podcast in, the Indiana basketball niche, for example, and that's really helped. But get yourself in front of people that are listening to podcasts by getting on other podcasts. So there's some other ways too, but I think that's really the #1 way, the #1 thing to look at is how do you position yourself to be, kind of a guest expert or possibly even, a guest host on another show. What else would you say, Johnny?
So yeah, to agree with you and to agree with Andrew and HubSpot's conclusion, with Facebook, Twitter being text-based, and you saying that being on a podcast is the best place because those are actual 100% podcast listeners. But I want to extend it out. So you said being a guest host, be interviewed on their show. But I also want you as showrunners to think and to act on this, which is something that I'm about to act on myself, is to reach out to, I'm going to say 3, if you can, 2 to 3 other podcasts of about the same size, I guess, if you want to call it, don't reach out to the top ones, and don't reach out to any on another on a podcast network, but solo shows like yours, and just literally introduce yourself via email and offer to read, to mention them. Like when you're listening to the end of any networked podcast, NPR or something, they're always like, and now that you're finished listening to Hack the Entrepreneur, why don't you go check out Unemployable by Brian Clark? He's got a great episode about this. And do that. And if you have 3 other shows, you can just have 3 reads, and you'll just tell them you'll stagger them, and then all 3, and you just make a sort of a mini network of all those people. And not that you say you're a network or anything, but just at the end of your show, mention the next person's. And at the end of your next show, mention the next person's. It's absolutely the greatest way. And I was actually really thinking about this because a guy who's selling advertising spots for me, he said that some shows he worked with started doing that. And he was just like, they couldn't believe the amount of listeners that came from it. He's literally small shows would literally just jump up 50 extra listeners or 100 extra listeners. And I was like, it's that's almost doubling their listenership in one sort of ad rotation of this. So to me, that's
a great idea.
Totally how to do it. It takes some work. It takes a little bit of hustle and emailing, but I mean, you're literally just trying to help each other. You don't have to say that you're in any way affiliated, but just make it just a casual at the end. Now that you're done listening to this, go listen to this one. They do the same. The next person does the same. 3 of you all do this. And you'll realize probably after a month or 2 of those 3 shows that you've kind of maxed out who's going to listen between the 3. And then you can move to the next one. If your audience has now grown, which it should have, you can move up a level into slightly bigger shows if you want and talk about your experience with the last one. But this to me is 100% free. Just takes some actual hustle getting out there via email and doing it. And then just sharing each other's audiences with each other, which obviously those relationships can help you in so many other ways too. But it will definitely 100% help right now with growing your audience.
That's a great idea.
To tie back to going to see Chris Guillebeau tonight, when I mentioned it to my wife earlier today, I was like, oh yeah, Chris Guillebeau's in town tonight. She's like, oh, I was hearing about that because she listens to Gretchen Rubin.
Yeah.
And she's like, at the end of a show, she's always telling me to listen to Chris Guillebeau's show. I was like, of course she is.
That's awesome.
She's like, I haven't yet, but still, I was like, that's really, it's smart. You're there, and now you're captive, and you want something else, and it's like, oh, cool, I'll do that.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
So that's my advice, which just piggybacks 100% off of what Jared was telling me.
I love that. So let me add a couple other pieces of advice. So I have found...
It's funny, actually, how you already mentioned 2 people on this that have money-related podcasts. So there's already a connection.
Yes. Yes. So I want to say that, I found that a high percentage of podcast listeners listen to video on YouTube and vice versa. I've really noticed this on the Assembly Call, actually, where we've really started to build up our YouTube audience. And it's also helped us build up our podcast audience at the same time, and kind of vice versa, and they build off of each other. And some people actually use YouTube like it's iTunes. That's where they listen to podcasts, is on iTunes. They use it almost as much for audio as they do for video. And so I think finding a way to turn your audio content into video content can help. Now, whether that is, recording, doing a live video recording of your podcast recording and putting that on YouTube, like what we do at the Assembly Call, or if you take your podcast audio, maybe you put text over it, or you put images over it, or whatever, or you do something totally different. finding a way to get your content onto YouTube can help you find people who are interested not just in video, but also people who are interested in audio. Because there's so many people who use YouTube and so many people who use YouTube search, obviously, that it's really powerful to be in there. And I think for podcasters who are already doing the audio version of it, you know, you might not be able to do the highest production quality video in the world. And so maybe you can't get 1 million subscribers on YouTube, but you can still see, you know, an increase and an exposure to the kind of audience that you want to be in a way that's meaningful for not a huge investment in terms of the cost and the time to produce the video. So that's something to think about. And the other thing that I would consider is adding some kind of live event to your content mix. And the reason why a live event can really help is because it adds a sense of urgency to what you're doing, especially on social media, you know, because it can be pretty easy when you're on social media to kind of pass up, you know, if someone tweets a link to a podcast or they tweet a link to this, that, or the other to a replay, and that's all well and good. But when you say, hey, we're going live right now, check us out, there's something about that that pulls more people in, because there's an urgency to watching something live, to be able to see it happen live, maybe to be able to answer a question or to be able to interact. There's something there. And so if you do that and you pull in more people because they're attracted to the live event, there you go. Now you have more, you know, additional people who are listeners or watchers of content who are now watching your live video. And if you make it interesting, if you make it compelling, if you have the right calls to action, then hopefully you can capture that person and get them to subscribe, get them on your email list, you know, get them to join your next live event. And maybe that's then when they'll subscribe to the podcast or the newsletter. But I would really think about seeing what you can do about adding a live event, because, you know, maybe especially if you haven't been seeing the results from social media that you want and not a lot of engagement, that can be a way to kind of, you know, jolt people a little bit and get that sense of urgency that sometimes you need to get that click to get someone to play, to hit play. So
like this live event?
What'd you say?
Is this what you're referring to as a live event?
I mean, this is a live event. This is also inside of a course. So this isn't something that we're necessarily, I mean, yes, like doing a Google Hangout like this, a Q&A.
So not like, it doesn't have to necessarily be like, put on your own conference for your
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, not like a live in-person event, but just a live video event. And I like the word event because I like thinking of them as events. I mean, these are things that you should prepare for, that you should have notes for, that you should promote, like really think of them that way. You know, I mean, you can just get on, you know, hey, I'm just going to go live today and let's do a Q&A, and it can be real casual. You can have that feeling, but I think you want to be as prepared as you can to really present something that's good and tight and crisp, you know, to respect the time of the audience. But for example, like if we were using this to grow the Showrunner podcast audience, obviously we would have done more public promotion. This was for a course, so we only promoted it via email and in the Facebook group. But we really would have promoted this to the audience. We might have said something on an episode, you know, done some social media calls to action leading up to it. And then as soon as the event goes live, and then you get people over. And, you know, we do this on the assembly call every week. And we've been doing it for a while now since we started doing video. And we've just slowly but surely seen the number of live people watching go up and the number of downloads on the podcast go up. So it's all kind of gone up together. And I think a big reason for that is because, you know, we've gotten people who watch this live, they like it, and then they subscribe to the podcast, or they become part of our really, really, you know, the people who come watch you live are your tightest, most loyal audience members. And the more that you can give those people opportunities to select you and say, hey, I love what these people are doing so much that I'm going to be here live and I'm going to make it regular appointment viewing, that really helps you get advocates. And then those people will go tell you to other people. And there's something about that live event that I think your most loyal people are really going to love being a part of. So that's why I think if you can work that into your mix and do it well and prepare for it, that can really be another way that will help too. Okay, anything else to add on that one, Mr. Naster?
I don't think so. I think you covered it. And I think we covered it earlier. Things you can do to find audience, but then also to build up your own and get more engagement.
Yep. Okay, so we've got a couple questions over here in the YouTube chat. So let's hit these. So the first question is, any updates on launching a successful podcast? Specifically, does New and Noteworthy still work the same way? Any updated tips to your original information would be great. I do think this is one of those lessons that we will be updating, and there is, kind of some new stuff here. What would you, Johnny, what are kind of some things off the top of your head that are maybe new or that might even have changed when it comes to launching a podcast?
So New and Noteworthy is still a thing. It still works. It works the same way to get onto New and Noteworthy. It doesn't work the same way to skyrocket you to podcast success overnight, which I don't know if it ever did, but that was definitely what was sold for a long time to a lot of people. And a lot of people have found out that that's just not true. And it's becoming less and less true all the time. So although you want to follow the steps to get on there, which we have inside the course, you also really, really need to focus on that step and step and step after that, which is really focusing on engagement, really focusing on getting people back to your website, getting them onto an email list, and then getting them to subscribe to your show. Those things are absolutely key. And then you can do that by obviously of one perfectly when you launch, hitting that gap, and then doing things like we just talked about, answering Andrew's question, to get in front of more people quickly. Because although it is like a marathon you're running with your show, as we also answered in the very first question, is tendency that when we don't get enough or any traction, maybe within 8 or 10 or 20 episodes, it's a natural thing to lose interest in it or to get onto something else. So although you have to think long-term for your podcast and know that you're going to be doing it long-term, you really have to go heads down and just really hit it hard at the beginning. Not just so that you build audience because that's all that matters. That's not at all. It's just that that audience is the one that's going to, I think, motivate you and inspire you to really get going and to really push and to want to do this. And so as much as I want to hope that we could podcast to nobody for 50 episodes and still stay motivated, I think the numbers have proven that it's not the case. It's not the case when you launch a book, a podcast, a business. It's just not how it works. So I really think that follow what we said to follow to hit New and Noteworthy, but then really, really know that the hard work really starts at that point. That's still getting ratings and reviews. They're absolutely important on iTunes. They're important on Google Play. They're important on Stitcher. They're important everywhere. And then it's really building that audience, which I love the idea of thinking of live events, because it's true. Everyone's just swamped with social media, and to listen to a show it's hard, right? So if it's like, well, I'm doing a live thing every Thursday at 4:30 on YouTube or on whatever platform you pick, and people can just slowly start coming, and then they know that you're on a podcast, and they'll also listen to your podcast, and all those things will help grow your show, and they take work. So to me, it's like, the biggest thing is that it seems like you could almost 2 years ago, or people wanted to believe that you could think of that sort of being almost the end of the first big race or something, hitting New and Noteworthy. And to me, that's like the start line. And so it's absolutely like you should work to get there, because we have the steps to get you onto New and Noteworthy. So why not take it? But just know that that's where the hard work begins. I mean, go into the Facebook community and talk to anybody who's been running a show for 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 episodes, and ask them questions, even before you launch. Like, so what did you do at episode 50, or what did you do at episode 100? You'll see sort of how how our perspectives change. I mean, I'm getting close to 400 episodes now, and Jared's at, I don't know how many hundreds of episodes or thousands. It's just like our change as like the finish line sort of extends out the further we get. So just don't approach New and Noteworthy like that's the finish line, because it's not at all. And to me, that's the fundamental sort of mindset change that's happened, and also the promotion and marketing change that's happened with launching a show.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important to think beyond the episodes that you're launching with. I'm currently in the process of, starting to game plan season 2 of the Sites podcast. I've got another project that I'm kind of working on. And, it's been interesting for me to see how my mindset has naturally changed as I plan these, one, a totally new show and one, just a new season. But, I've always kind of been more of the, let's get the episodes out and let's kind of figure it out as we go. And we can be nimble and we can turn this thing, but let's, just keep, getting the episodes out. And well, I think that can work fine sometimes. I think it's a lot better to really have a plan in place from the beginning. And so what I mean by that is, you should have, 3 to 5 to 10 episodes, however many you need in the can right off the bat when you launch. I think, Johnny, you typically say, like 3 or 4 weeks worth of episodes ready to go when you launch. But it's got to be about more than just the episodes, right? Like, what are you asking people to do? What is your goal? Obviously, you want people to download the episodes, but are you trying to get people onto an email list? And if you're trying to get people onto an email list, what is the incentive for them to do so? Is there going to be a weekly newsletter attached? Is there going to be a free course, an email course or something inside of an LMS? What is going to be that incentive? And I think it's important to think about that from the beginning, because, if you get a new Noteworthy and if you get this big bump, or just the natural attention that you'll get at the beginning, you want to be able to capitalize on that. And so, I really think thinking holistically in terms of your big picture goals, and not just, let me get this out there, let me try and get downloads up, and then I'll worry about all this stuff. I think it'd be much better to take another month, however long it takes you, to get a good opt-in incentive going. To really, to get your email list and subscription really integrated very well into your site, to work out all of those details. How's that now going to fit into my call to action? What does this change about the structure of my show? What am I asking people to do? Really going through that and figuring out those details so that you can hit the ground running and you're not scrambling, when you get, 200 downloads an episode and you're like, oh crap, let me add all this stuff now because I need to capitalize on it. Having that stuff ready to go from the beginning, being prepared for success, I think is really important, rather than waiting and hoping for success and then saying, I'll do all of this stuff later on. So that's, I know for me, the biggest mindset change that I have had as a showrunner, preparing shows and planning shows. And I think it will help me with future projects start better and really start to see meaningful results quicker, as opposed to just going out, putting the audiences, or putting the episodes out, kind of building up download numbers and then figuring it out after that. I think taking more time to do it from the beginning is a smart way to approach it. Let me look for some other questions here. So we've got Ian is here. And by the way, Sonia's here. Hello, Sonia. It's awesome to see you. Jamar is here. It's good to see you, Jamar. Ian says, I'm excited you guys are doing this. I hit 39 episodes on my podcast and then stopped. I'm planning a new podcast, but have really been dragging my feet. Here's a question for you, Johnny. What advice would you give to Ian? He had these 39 episodes. He stopped. Now he's planning a new show, been kind of dragging his feet. What do you think is the single most important thing that he can think about or focus on to get him from dragging his feet to sprinting toward that new show? You're muted, by the way. You're still muted, but it's okay.
My dog was barking. Sorry.
We got you.
Oh, I don't think there's one thing, because Ian, first I'd want to know, why did you quit at 39 episodes? And why are you starting a new show rather than maybe continuing on with the existing show, but with maybe some sort of twist or whatever it is you want to do? And then I'd also ask, what have you learned? What have you learned from those 39 episodes? If you could go back, which it seems is what you're trying to do for yourself, is to go back and start over. What are you going to do differently to not get to 39 episodes again and quit? So I guess the one thing I would get is for you to actually answer that for yourself. And figure out what that is. We've talked about before, sort of like relaunching, if you will. It's something that we did at Rainmaker.fm several times, with meaning that you would at least keep your feed because there's subscribers, I would assume, to that feed. Maybe not that many, hence why you quit at 39 episodes. But there are some, and you can continue on sort of with that feed, even with a new show. Rebrand it and continue on, but at least not start from scratch. But maybe it's completely different. So I don't feel like I know enough to be able to tell you, but I would really just push you to think about why you stopped, why you're not continuing on with that one, with maybe a rebrand or a shuffle around. And then if you are starting again, what have you learned and what are you going to do differently? Because if you're not going to do anything differently, then there's no point. It's just sort of an exercise in frustration that you're going through. Because getting to 39 episodes, as you know, and as lots of us know here, is a lot of work. And then you quit. So you've made it past whatever that blurry number is we tried to talk about and answer in question 1 is, and we don't know, but you've made it past that. 39 is not that number where most people quit. So I'd really want to know why that happened. And sort of deal with that first. And that might really give you clarity on, no, I know exactly what went wrong and why and where, and then you're going to fix that. And then by all means, just go back and then follow, as we just answered, with too new and noteworthy, get into there, but that's where the hard work begins. Really focus on any sort of asset you've built up in this first show, whether it's email lists or feeds with subscribers or just anybody you've networked with that can use to propel the next one. Absolutely use those, because you're not starting from scratch. But first of all, take that time to wonder, because to me, dragging your heels is because you don't, usually that's because we don't quite believe that we have the clear path the next time to do it differently and to succeed. And so you need to kind of know what that is. I mean, you can drop more information into Facebook if you want, and we can get deeper onto it. I'm just kind of going off a really basic sort of question. But
he did add that his last show was just him offering an opinion piece and a meditation. The new show is an interview show. It felt like it was hard to build an audience without having another person on there. So if it's a similar topic and it's just, you're shifting to an interview show, but the audience that you're targeting is the same, then I think you can relaunch and kind of keep that same audience. If there's any type of significant number there, keep that audience, and you can just kind of restart it, explain why you're doing something different, call it season 2, whatever you want. But there's definitely, that seems like it'd be reasonable to do a relaunch and not necessarily a whole new show. I would also add this, Johnny, when it comes to dragging your feet, and just speaking from my own personal experience, I know it really helps being mindful about when I'm dragging my feet. So I really try to identify, like, okay, I'm procrastinating here. I'm dragging my feet. Like, what is it right now in this moment that is keeping me from this? Because I know I'm excited about this. I know I have enthusiasm for this. And when I'm doing ABC, when I'm, outlining what the new episodes will be, or when I'm recording, like, I'm really into this. But for some reason, when I'm doing this, it kind of stops me in my tracks. And like, for example, I know that for me, when I've got, kind of a new project, and when I have to-dos and I'm executing on stuff, man, I just roll through it and I'm having fun and it's exciting and I'm enthusiastic. But when I run out of kind of my, the to-dos that I've listed out, I kind of drag my feet sometimes, because it's a little bit difficult for me to get into kind of the big picture planning mode, but that place where you're really thinking big picture and excited about the idea, but translating it into short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, and then what am I actually going to do right now today to go to that next step? And so I really try to, in those moments, focus on what has me enthusiastic about the show. What process can I follow now to help me break this big idea up into smaller chunks so I can get to-dos onto my list, and now I can start executing again. Because I know when I do that, I stop dragging my feet and I really start moving forward. And so I think if you can identify maybe the moments or the tasks or the areas of the planning of your show that cause you to drag your feet, be really mindful about it, then maybe you can devise some sort of solution or process for overcoming that, instead of it just being kind of a general, I'm dragging my feet and I don't necessarily know what to do next. That has really helped me, because when I identified what it was, and where, so I could almost anticipate that it was going to happen, now I kind of knew what to do next to avoid it or to kind of go around it. And that's really helped me make more progress when, in the past, maybe I would derail me for a couple of weeks until I got back into it. So if you can really be mindful about that, figure out when you're dragging your feet, hopefully then the next time you can avoid that. Because it's all about moments, I mean, when you're dragging your feet, like there are little moments where you're not doing things that you maybe think that you should be doing. So when you can know when they're going to come, anticipate them and combat them, that can move you forward. And that's all it is just one foot in front of the other, one step after the next. And that's what gets you on the road toward launching your show, having a successful show, and building a great audience.
Do you, in your professional opinion, Jared, because Ian went on to say that my last show was me offering an opinion piece / meditation. New show is an interview show. That's a very common thing people do. Switch from one to the other. Another person on there.
I didn't hear what you said. You were breaking up.
Oh, but he just said that he felt like it was hard to build an audience without having another person. Is, in your professional opinion, is that make or break just literally between having another person on there or not a make or break sort of reason that a show would not build an audience? Or would you want to push him or anyone else using that as the reason for it not working, and not sort of going deep enough looking at the audience and what it is you're providing them?
It could be a reason why his show isn't connecting. I mean, I think, like, independent of kind of who the host is, it's not like an interview show is more likely to develop an audience than an individual show. I mean, there's many successful examples of both, but maybe he is not comfortable connecting with his audience one-on-one, and he would be more comfortable connecting in an interview, and he could deliver the content better, structure it better for the audience in that way. So, I think if Ian looks at what happened over those first 39 episodes and he sees that it wasn't connecting, and he felt part of that was because he wasn't really delivering the content how he thought, or, it just wasn't reaching his audience in the way that he felt like it could, then maybe if he's more comfortable, or if he has a better idea of how to bring that out with an interview, then that could fix it. There's a lot of unknowns there that are really hard to answer. And a lot of that can depend on the host. I've hosted tons of shows now, so I feel pretty comfortable doing it myself and doing it with other people. But, like the first time I hosted a solo show, I was pretty uncomfortable doing it and didn't really feel like, I never quite felt like the content was right, and after hundreds of episodes doing that, I feel like I have a better handle on it now. But I can totally see that, how you might feel like, all right, let me get someone else here. I can, leverage their perspective, and I'm better at answering questions and keeping the conversation going than just doing it myself. That does seem reasonable if that's kind of how he feels. And I could see that maybe that would be a change that could help connect better with an audience. But it really just depends on the specifics of that particular show and that particular host.
Cool.
And Ian says with a guest, he can advertise or reach out to their audience. So, there's something there. The guest may promote the show, and that can help you build the audience. That's something.
That's something that's changed a lot in the last 2 years. I think just with the popularity of podcasting and the fact that so many of our guests now are on so many podcasts. And it goes back to an earlier question of, like, if they promote it on Twitter, how many people, like HubSpot thought, how many people are on Twitter and then end up going to a podcast and listening? It's text-based to audio. And although that does help, you're right, it's not like a make or break. The content still has to engage the audience in a way, and still has to provide the value to them in order to make it worth their time. So it's just, I guess what I was trying to get at, and you really touched on, is sort of, it's more nuanced. It's not black and white. It's not like shows that are solo can't do well because hardcore history and massive shows will exactly prove you wrong.
It's the first one I thought of too.
Exactly. And so many shows, there's so many interview shows that just don't get past that first 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 episodes because they just don't take off. It doesn't matter how big your guests are. Lots of them are just on too many shows these days. And it just doesn't necessarily, you still have to push it on the platforms like on iTunes, on Google Play, all those places to get those listeners who are actually there. And then you have to get them onto an email list, and then you have to push them and then do live events and those kinds of things. But totally, Ian, like if you feel like you can provide more value in that way, then absolutely you should do it. But just know that it's not an answer to all of the problems of not getting an audience. Unfortunately, you still have to hit that audience right. You have to find the gaps, and you have to create the product that people want.
All right, so we got about 5 minutes. There's a couple more questions in here. If we don't get to the question, it's obviously a great idea to post it in the Facebook group so that we can answer and everybody has a chance to answer at that point. Even if we did answer your question and you want additional perspectives, post it in the Facebook group. Always a good idea. Here's a question from Nathan. Nathan says, I'm about 3 weeks from launch and trying to build up my pre-launch email list and publishing a guest post in a few days that should get eyeballs and want to direct them in a link to a landing page. Struggling with the copy for that page, how to entice people to opt in other than just letting them know they'll get updates. T-shirt giveaway. So this is kind of a classic issue here with, copy on an opt-in page, Nathan, and you don't, you say here, other than letting them know that they'll get updates. So I definitely wouldn't just promote that they're going to get updates. That's a feature. You really want to promote the benefit. So what is the value of getting those updates? Like I had to do this for the assembly call. We do a weekly newsletter. It's called Six Banner Sunday, and it's a news roundup of all the IU news. And so like, that's great. You get news roundups, but what really sells it is going to the next level. Become a smarter IU basketball fan. Let us do the work for you and round up all the news so you don't have to do it. Save time, learn more about your Hoosiers, right? Those are the benefits. So the feature is the updates, but the benefit is what? And so obviously we can't tell you what that benefit is, but this is where you've really got to flip your perspective, sit in your audience's chair and think about, okay, if I was my audience, why would I want this? Because I don't necessarily need an email update for a podcast if I'm already getting the podcast episodes in iTunes or wherever I listen to podcasts. So, and look, I think if you can't really describe the benefit of the updates, then you may have a real issue here, and what you're sending to people may not be all that great. And you may want to think about, okay, I got to add something here so that there is a clear benefit that I can describe. So I would just think benefit, not feature. And when you can translate that into copy, that's what will get people to opt in.
Absolutely. You need to, you said teacher giveaway, but it's generally considered like a lead magnet sort of thing. You need to create something that's worth somebody giving you their email for. So if you go to showrunner.fm, our benefit is that we have the headline, Are you ready to start a remarkable podcast? Get your free 9-step beginner's guide to launching a podcast today. By far our best lead magnet we've ever created. And it's 20 pages long or something. It's 9 steps. It's a PDF guide that people download and give us their email address, and then we get to email them from there. Give them something. What is the thing that they want? People who are interested in the Showrunner, or would be even if we hadn't launched the show yet, they are interested in starting a podcast or at least running a remarkable show. Absolutely. Here's a 9-step guide for free. Right? So take that, or take what Jared said that they do at Assembly Call, and like if you want to aggregate stuff and bring it to people in a package, by all means, whatever that is, make it something very specific for their exact issue or whatever it is you're going to be helping them with. That's what you want, because that's what people will sign up for, and then you have a list to promote it to. It's not about the show coming. People don't care about anybody else's show that's coming soon. They care about it once it's there, but they don't care about it coming soon. But if you can give them something right now that will help them, by all means, they'll give you their email.
Yep. All right, and real quick, last question here. This is from Sonia. What's the benefit of doing seasons versus a new show every week? Is it just doing less work or shows? When a new season goes live, do you have to work really hard to get your audience re-engaged? So let me, a couple answers here. The benefit of doing seasons versus a new show is, yes, it can be less work and you can focus more on quality than just filling a weekly quota. I think showing up in people's feeds every week is a good thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do a new show every week. So I think one benefit of doing seasons, and I'm actually thinking about doing this for another show that I'm planning, is, you really focus on working hard on this season's worth of episodes, okay? You get those done, right? Now you can take a little bit of a break from doing new episodes. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go away, though. You can rerun episodes, and maybe, just rerunning season 1's episodes right after season 1 concludes isn't the greatest thing. But if you're doing an evergreen show, think about when you're 3 seasons in, right? Now you can rerun episodes from season 1 or kind of do a mixture during a time when you're not putting out new episodes. Tons of shows do this, like Planet Money does this, Freakonomics does this. A lot of shows do this, and it can be a way for you to really capitalize on the fact that there's always churn in your show. You've always got new audience members coming and old audience members leaving, and the new people may not have gone back and listened to your entire archive of shows, and you can pull back some of your greatest hits, and it actually gives you some freedom to do that because there are open spots in your schedule built in because you have seasons. Now, I will say, it certainly seems like it could be, a bit of a challenge to re-engage people once the new season starts, but I think there are ways to combat that. I think there are ways that even if, you're doing it in seasons and you're going away right now, you're not producing new episodes, if you have people on an email list, reaching out to people once a week with something valuable can keep you top of mind. Obviously, rerunning episodes can keep you top of mind. And then every now and then checking in and letting people know what's happening can help. So maybe you're in the middle of, your hiatus between season 1 and season 2, but you pop on and do just a quick 10-minute episode, maybe that has a few clips of some interviews that you've done that you've banked for the future. Or, you just give people some quick updates that can help you stay top of mind. We had this challenge with the Assembly Call because it's a seasonal show. It was just a post-game show. So we only did it during the season, and there's that big 6 to 7 month gap in between there. And so that's when we started doing, a show every couple weeks. And then we got the opportunity to do this radio show, and we started doing it every week. And it's no coincidence that our audience growth has skyrocketed in season, the last couple of seasons because we've done more during the off season. So I think you can find some creative ways to engage folks. Maybe you do a couple of live events, a couple live Q&As just to say hey to the audience, and you post those in between. There's lots of things that you can do, I think, to help keep people engaged so that it's not a total re-engagement once the next season comes up, if you haven't been, rerunning episodes or doing something on your normal schedule. So that could be an entire podcast episode. Those are just some really, really quick thoughts. But those are kind of my initial thoughts on that. Johnny, do you have anything to wrap up with?
I think you nailed it. It's really, I think if you plan to do the seasons, I think there are benefits. I would really think about doing seasons on a show that I would start from now on, because there's one thing that also, if you're consistently always there in showing up on someone's phone in their feed with all their other shows, it's kind of like you kind of stop seeing it because it's just there. But it's like, if it hasn't been there for a while, you re-engage them and you all of a sudden you appear 2 months later again. It's like people will be excited again. So yes, you have to re-engage them, but I think also their excitement gets re-engaged, and possibly their love of your show and you as the host gets re-engaged too. So there are definitely, it's been proven model within television and even some radio for, I don't know how long, since television started, I guess, because it works, right? Because it works on so many levels, the production schedule, your work schedule, and also just that audiences do appreciate having that sort of downtime from it and coming back to it. So I think it's something that's really worth thinking about for every new show coming out, thinking if that's right for you, and knowing that there's huge, huge benefits to it. Negatives, if you want to look at them with the whole re-engagement thing, especially if your show hasn't taken off, it can be hard, I think, to because you're kind of not re-engaging, you're kind of starting again each time. But it's something that really interests me, and I think that for a lot of shows, it's definitely a smart move to make.
And Jamar adds, I find people are awaiting in anticipation for the show to return with his new show. At Seasons also, he says, give me a cognitive break to some extent, then I can plan promotion and other projects in between, which is great. And I think, more and more, look, a focus on quality over quantity is really going to be important, because there's no shortage of ideas out there. There's no shortage of shows out there. There's no shortage of opportunities for people to have their attention taken. So you really want to make sure that when you get people's attention, it's something great that they're getting. And if that means doing a little bit less, but giving people more in those moments when you have them, in some ways that can be a lot better than just churning out something new constantly, but people never really feeling like they're getting anything great out of it, then they might fall off. But you know, Hardcore History is a great example. You know, how does Dan Carlin have to, you know, re-engage his audience when his new episode comes out on no timetable, never know when, and it's, you know, a 5-hour episode. Now, look, that's an extreme example, but that does show that when you do quality work, people will wait for you and they will want it. And that helps mitigate the issue of re-engagement, because people are so engaged anyway that they're just waiting for you. So great question, Sonia. That might be a good one to pose in the Facebook group, because it'd be fun to get everybody's perspectives on that. All righty. Well, Johnny, this has been fun. Man, it felt good doing this again.
This was good.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew and Mario and Ian and Jamar and Sonia and everybody who sent questions in, who engaged. Really, really enjoyed it. We'll be back in a couple of Thursdays doing more of these. We're going to have new episodes of the Showrunner podcast coming out soon as well. So we're excited to be back. We're going to get this thing rolling again, and we do it for you guys. So, you know, we really appreciate it when you're here. We love being able to answer your questions, and we do it for ourselves too, because we have fun with this and we love talking about this stuff. So we look forward to talking with you all 2 Thursdays from now. Take care.
Take care, guys and ladies.